was taking Algebra 1 that year, which I shouldn't have taken. I had no business being in Algebra 1. I should have been in pre-algebra. But together with my parents, we thought that this would be a good challenge for me. It was not. Sometimes playing up makes you better. Other times it just ruins your life. The latter was true for me in 8th grade. And I didn't just phone it in. I worked and studied, and I just could not get it. You know, there's sometimes they say that failure builds character. And that might be true. But when you're in the middle of failure, you don't want character. You just want to know what the function of X is. And so about halfway through the semester, I knew I was toast. And with a test looming, I took desperate measures. You see, there was this kid I sat next to. We'll call him Mark because that's his name. And he was known as the guy that could get you stuff. The one on the inside that could just find things, right? It was Mark, years later, who was the first person that I knew with a CD burner and Napster. And that means for $20, he could get you a compact disc with Limp Bizkit and Mambo No. 5 on it. He was the right guy to know. It was common knowledge at AR Middle School that Mark had a cheat sheet on test day. A really small little piece of paper, no frills, just the necessary numbers. And for a price, he would share it with people. I caught him in the hallway one day before class and said, "Hey, can I get one of those cheat sheets?" He said, "For the right price." I said, "At this point, I'm desperate. I'll pay anything." And so we worked out the deal that we would walk into class. He would use the cheat sheet first, and he would drop it on the floor and slide it over to me, and I would pick it up by my hand underneath my foot. The plan was in motion. We walked into class. This wasn't the first time in my life that I'd ever been trapped. And it certainly wasn't the last. And I have found time and time after again, when I get trapped, if I lean on my own understandings and go by my own smarts and wittiness, it's usually a recipe for disaster. Because when I get trapped, my playbook's just not very thick. There are a few things that I'm able to do. If I get in a situation I can't get out of, I will hide it, or I'll try to fix it, or I'll just ignore it. And maybe you do those things too. I'll try to hide it. I mean, after all, search histories are deletable. But I know that no matter how I tuck things away, or how I rearrange my life, or what filters I put on my face and on my social media, I know that I go to bed at night and I can't outrun my sin. Or I'll try to fix it, right? Like I'll just say, you know what? I'm never doing that again. That time was the last time. And then a week later, I say it again. I say, no, I can be strong enough. I can will myself out of it. I can pull myself out of this mess. But I've found time and time again, I'm just not very good at cleaning up my own messes. I'm like my 2-year-old daughter, who just in the last couple of weeks has taken to changing her own diapers. And she's not very good at it. And I have all over my hands. Or if I can't fix it, or if I can't hide it, then I'll just ignore it. And I'll just think, if I just close my eyes and turn away from it, maybe the monster will go away. And if I just pretend it's not there, and if we just don't talk about it and just avoid it, maybe the problem will just fix itself. You know, like acne or America. But I'm not good at any of those things. And my own heart sells me out. And I find myself hiding in the garden, and when God walks through, like he did with Adam and Eve that one afternoon, I know that I'm naked and ashamed. So that's what my life feels like. Which I find very comforting then when we open up our text this evening and look at 1 John chapter 2, starting in verse 1. John starts our text this evening with 3 little simple words that bring so much comfort to me. My dear children. My dear children. I mean, if we look at these three words, I think John says a whole lot. That implies a connection. That implies covenant. That implies you and me are in this together. Let me tell you this. My friends, we'll ask some of you this evening to step forward and say, I've been stuck. I've been rebelling. I need help. In that moment, it is my deepest prayer for you that you would have a friend or an adult leader that would say, you're not going to go through this alone. You are my responsibility. Dear, man, that is some love, right? That is compassion. I don't know what it is about us. I guess it's just human nature that for some reason, when we want somebody to repent, we want them to get everything they have coming to them. We want them to pay for everything. And no wonder people stay so quiet about the things they're going through. If you're going to make a decision tonight and say, I've been rebelling and I need to repent, I hope you find an atmosphere full of love and value. John wants the best for his friends, for the readers, just like your adult leaders and I want the same for you. And then children. Children, they are inexperienced. They are ignorant. They are dumb. Kids are dumb. You can say that. They are. They don't have any life experience. They don't know what they're doing. They're figuring things out. And like we're all ex-kids here, so we can admit, yeah, we're hopefully a whole lot smarter than we were back then. And so we see things like we hear God say, refer to us as his children, and we think that he's being sweet. No. He's implying that we have a long way to go. And that is okay. Listen to me. Christianity is not about getting everything right. Christianity is about knowing who your Father is. And so I walked into the classroom and we sat down and the teacher passed out the test and everything was going according to plan. Mark sat beside me to my left and he answered all of his questions, well, at an unusually fast pace. Some might call it supernatural. And then he dropped the test, or dropped the cheat sheet on the floor as we had discussed, put his foot over it, and slid it over to me. The moment had come. And so I reached down, picked up the cheat sheet, and as I returned to the top of my desk, my teacher was standing right there. I know. I was there. And she took my test away, she took the cheat sheet and sent me home with a letter to my parents about their cheating son. No, you don't understand. This is not fair. Well, Eric, did you cheat? My dad asked me that evening. No, I didn't have a chance. And I spent the next hour trying to convince my parents that they should let me off the hook because I'm not as bad as Mark was. Mark's the one that brought he made the cheat sheet. It's his cheat sheet. It's his fault that I'm in this. And I have found, well, that shifting the blame and pointing to other people who are worse than you is never a really good way to defend yourself. And I think that's because, well, rebels are really bad advocates. John continues. We're only 3 words into the text this evening, but John continues, my dear children, and then he says this, I write this to you so that you will not sin. Sin, once again, is the culprit in this story, but not the sin that I think we think of. You see, it's never been the big sins in my life that have tripped me up, at least at first. For me, it's always been those little ones. I'll do the little things, and as long as I can say, yeah, well, but at least I'm not sleeping with her. Yeah, well, at least I didn't say it to his face. Or yeah, but I was just joking. He knew it was a joke. I was just joking. Well, I'm not the one who made the cheat sheet. As long as I can point to somebody else and say, they're much worse than me, I can sleep at night. But this puts us in a really weird place. Because it's not about what someone else is doing. It's about what's going on in my own heart. And I'm convinced that the enemy will never come to you and say, hey, put this on. Because we'll go, no, you're the devil and that's a chain. But what he will do is he will say, hey, put this on. Well, that's just paper. Yeah. Put it on. And before you know it, we're in chains. And we say, yeah, but it's not this. It's not that chain. I'm not as bad as that person. And we get so comfortable in chains, saying, but at least it's not those. And this problem with this whole, are you more like Hitler or more like Mother Teresa thing, is that as long as we are somewhere in the middle of those two people. Look, it's not like I was serving the poor in Calcutta, but, I didn't start World War II either, so I'm cool. And we find ourselves stuck somewhere between a Nazi and a nun, which is what they should have called The Sound of Music, and we get so comfortable being in chains. And while we're focusing on Hitler and Mother Teresa, Jesus stands way over here and says, hey, I'm the standard. Come stand with me. I can't. I got these chains. Dad, you don't understand. They're going to suspend me. With that, my dad nodded and walked out of the room. He went down the hall and he made a phone call, and as best I could tell, he wasn't ordering pizza. I know that because he said algebra a lot more than he said pepperoni. That's a context clue. But he came back in the room and said, we're going to meet your teacher, your principal, in his office tomorrow morning. Okay. And he said this, I'm going to go with you. Okay. Can we have pizza? There really are two things you need to know about my dad at this point. And this is true. The first thing is he is the most loyal man that I've ever met. He is a dad who has my entire life showed up. In fact, when I was in third grade, my Boy Scout leader was Freddie Wisner's older brother. Yes, that was his real last name. No, it was not easy to go through school like with a last name like Wisner. But Freddie's older brother was our Boy Scout leader. He had been kicked out of the Army the summer before. We don't know why, but we do know that he had a lot of free time on his hands. And so the school, for some reason, thought, well, this man has disgraced our nation. Let's let him teach young boys how to start fires. So for a few months, Private Wisner was our Boy Scout leader. He was relieved, I guess you should say, of... Thank you. He was relieved of his post after one evening. This is a true story, where we were at the school and he took us in all collectively into the men's room and then made us fight him off like he was a predator in the bathroom stall. And I was in 3rd grade, but I thought, I don't think there's a merit badge for this. So at the meeting the following week, the Boy Scout troop was disgraced, and the regional leader said, well, we've got these boys. They know how to fight, but not much else. What are we going to do? Who's going to step in? And my dad, who had walked me the 3 houses down to my elementary school, said on the way there, if they ask for a volunteer, I can't do it. I'm too busy. I can't do it. Okay, Dad. But when the man said, who can fill in, my dad said, I'll do it. Because he's a dad that showed up. Second thing is, he grew up in that town. He went to that same middle school. Okay, as his job as a pharmacist in town meant that he knew every adult in that town over 30 years old. And to top it all off, of course, he was a legendary student. There were still teachers and administrators in the building when I went that were there when Danny Epperson was there. And every kid embarrasses their parents at one point or another. My day had come. And so when my dad said, we're going to meet with the principal, I knew what he was doing. He was putting his reputation on the line for me. Now, does that compare to what Jesus has done for us? Of course not. Absolutely not. But what it does help me do is it does help me realize just what an advocate does. John continues. But if anybody does sin, spoiler alert, we all will, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ, the righteous one. He is the atoning sacrifice for our sins, and not only are ours, but also for the sins of the whole world. This word advocate is such an interesting word to me. It literally means somebody who stands beside somebody and pleads their case. Somebody who cannot speak on their own. They need somebody to come beside them and say, they are with me. So that means this. If Jesus is your advocate, Jesus is not ashamed of you. If Jesus is your advocate, he is not embarrassed to be around you. He stands beside you and says, back off, she's mine. And my goodness, that should fill us with this amazing mixture of joy and humility. So in Hebrews chapter 4, it says that with Jesus, through Jesus, we can enter the throne, the very presence of God, with confidence. Not just barely squeaking by, but with confidence because Jesus has paid our price. And that is what Jesus does. He says, back off. So we walked into the principal's office. My teacher was already there, and the adults made pleasantries, and I sat down in an oversized soft chair, and the principal walked behind his desk, and he had my test on the middle of his desk, and he sat down and kind of fluffed his tie a little bit, and then he picked up the test, which was blank, and then he looked over at me, and then he looked back at the test, and he put the test down and said, "Do you have a cheat sheet?" And I sheepishly answered, "Yeah, I did." And I don't know if it was the mahogany, but in that moment, I just got really burdened by what I had done. And I felt the weight of the moment, and I just hated so much that I was there. I hated that I'd embarrassed my dad, and most of all, I just hated algebra. But as I sat there and I looked at the floor, the principal went into a speech about cheating. and how if I didn't straighten up, I was going to ruin my academic career, and I was going to be a washout and a burnout, and I would embarrass the whole town. And he was just getting warmed up. When my dad interjected, he said, "Now, Ed, that's just about enough." He called the principal by his first name. This just got real. And you know what? Maybe it's time we call the devil by his first name too. You know what Satan means, right? It means the accuser. He makes his living off of telling you just how bad you are. But guess what? All he can do to you is accuse you. And if you listen to him long enough, he whispers in your ear and he makes this speech about how terrible you are. He says things like, "I know what you did. I saw what you did. And that's you. You're worthless. I know what you did." But if you listen even closer, there's another voice who says, "That's just about enough of that. Because I know what she did. And I saw what she did. And that does not define her. Because I paid for that." And Jesus says, "Enough." With my principal reeling because my dad called him by his first name in front of a minor, my dad said, "I'll tell you what, let's do this. Let's let him take the test right now again. And if he does poorly, we can send him to pre-algebra. But suspending him is not going to help anyone, especially his mother and I." This was not my plan. This was off script. I did not want to take that test again, or for the first time. But the adults seemed to agree and thought this was a wonderful idea. So the principal and my dad left the room, and I went behind the principal's desk and took the test. About 15 minutes later, I walked out of the front doors of Alice Robertson Middle School. My dad was sitting on the steps. Without even looking at me, he knew it was me, and he said, "How'd you do?" I made a 55. And my dad said, "Gosh, no wonder you cheated." And I sat down next to my dad on the steps of Alice Robertson Middle School. And he looked at me and he said, How did we get into this?" I shrugged. I didn't know. He said, "Eric, it's my job. It's my job to help you. But you've got to let me do my job. Why didn't you tell me you were struggling?" And then I said one of the things that I've said many times when I felt trapped. I thought she'd be mad. I didn't think you'd understand. I was embarrassed. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know who to turn to, and I'm just so sorry. My dad said, "You know you're going to need to move to pre-algebra, don't you?" Not pre-algebra. I mean, anything but pre-algebra. My dad wasn't punishing me in that moment. He was setting me free. And I could have rebuffed him and said, "Now I think I'm getting the hang of this. They put an X on every test. It's got to be the answer at least once. I need you to move to pre-algebra." And I did. Not because he made me, but because I trusted him. And I trusted him because I saw just how far he was willing to go for me. I put down my rebellion. I stopped trying to figure my own way out, not because of force, but because of love. And friends, can I tell you that Jesus got a hold of me the same way? John finishes our scripture this evening by saying this: we know that we have come to know him if we keep his commands. Whoever says, I know him, but does not do what he commands is a liar, and the truth is not in that person. But if anyone obeys his word, love for God is truly made complete in them. This is how we know we are in him. Whoever claims to live in him must love as Jesus did. I spent so many years of my life thinking that, well, honestly, thinking I had just squeaked by. That I had somehow figured out this magic riddle and that I was in heaven, not because of God's delight or because of Jesus' love, just because I kind of cracked the code. And I thought that God was always kind of, well, mildly disappointed in me. And I thought, well, if I do enough things, maybe he'll delight in me. But I want you to know that reasoning and that thinking is completely reversed. Jesus has already loved us. He has already given everything for me. He has already been my advocate and has taken on my chains. And now all he's asking me to do is to trust him. It would be silly, right? After seeing what Jesus has done for us, going to the cross, taking on my sin, defeating death, preparing a place for me, if we were to just say, hey, thanks, but I got it pretty good over here. Like, I think I got some things figured out. So I appreciate it, cool, but let me just kind of do my own thing. Be silly. But occasionally, Jesus will ask me, he'll sit next to me on the steps and say, I need you to do this, or I need you to believe me when I say this. And I'll say, but I don't want to move to pre-algebra. It's not punishment. I've come so that you may have full, abundant life. Will you just trust me? And I can tell you that the times that I have, that I've gotten up off the steps and I've gone to pre-algebra, and I've listened to the voice of Jesus, he hadn't failed me yet. And so I understand that we might not understand everything that he's asking us to do. And that obedience might look a little bit like change. But can I tell you, it's actually very, very freeing. And, well, I don't know how you got into this, but I know the way out.